The house was old, the kind of place that creaked even when no one moved, that sighed with the weight of decades. When the Morris family moved in, they knew it had history, but no one expected it to feel so heavy. While cleaning out the attic, David Morris dislodged a loose wooden panel, revealing a narrow gap in the wall. Inside, wrapped in decaying fabric and dust, was a single black and white photograph. Time had yellowed its edges and cracked its surface, but the image was intact enough to see a family seated in front of what looked like the same house, only older, untouched by renovation or paint. The clothing was dated, early 1900s perhaps, and the expressions were stiff as if caught mid-thought, but something in the photograph wasn't right. Among the plainly dressed mother, father, and two children sat a fifth figure, front and center, whose appearance was unlike anything David had seen before. The figure was rendered in what looked like a photonegative. His skin was pure white, his eyes pitch black, his suit a reverse shade of reality. The light bent wrong around him, as though the camera had failed to process his presence properly. It didn't look like a photographic error. It looked intentional, deliberate, almost malicious. David called out to his wife, and together they examined it under the kitchen light. She asked if it was a prank, but he swore he had just found it, and her unease only grew when she recognized the porch in the image. It was unmistakably theirs, down to the cracked floorboard and crooked stair. The uncanny figure seemed to glow, even in the dim kitchen lighting, stealing focus no matter where you looked. The longer they stared, the more discomfort bloomed in their chests, a slow, sickening twist that made their skin prickle. They placed the photo in a drawer, unsure of what to do with it, but neither of them could shake the image from their minds. That night, both of them dreamed of the attic, of old wood creaking under invisible weight, and of eyes too inky, endless eyes that watched without blinking. The next morning, their daughter, Emily, found the photo lying on her bed. Neither parent had put it there. After the photograph was discovered, it refused to stay hidden. No matter where they tried to store or discard it, it would return, always without explanation. The first time it happened, they had placed it in the bottom drawer of David's desk, locked it, and forgot about it. By evening, it lay in the center of the living room floor, perfectly flat, untouched by dirt or dust. The next day, it appeared inside the refrigerator, its surface cold to the touch, moisture clinging to the glossy paper as if it had been there for hours. They threw it in the trash, only for it to reappear beneath Emily's pillow that night. The more it returned, the more it changed. At first, the image was identical, but then the figure in photonegative began to shift. He grew clearer with each reappearance. His once featureless face began to take on detail, a faint suggestion of a grin, sharper cheekbones, the folds in his clothing more defined. The rest of the people in the photo, however, began to degrade. Their faces blurred, their limbs softening as if the image was decaying around him. Every night, the photo would be somewhere new, sometimes on the bathroom mirror, perfectly centered with no visible means of attachment, sometimes tucked neatly into folded laundry. Each appearance brought a wave of unease that settled deep in their bones. They tried burning it, watching flames curl its edges, only for it to return the next morning untouched. They soaked it in water, shredded it, even buried it in the woods behind the house. Nothing worked out. It wasn't just the photo returning, it was changing them, observing them, growing bolder with each silent reappearance. And every time they looked at it, he was a little closer to the camera as the days passed. The figure in the photograph no longer looked like a photographic glitch. It began to resemble something real too real. The contrast of his skin, once dark and alien, softened to unnatural texture, like pale flesh lit from behind. His eyes remained impossibly dark, swallowing light, but now they shimmered faintly, giving the illusion of depth. The shadows around his form became more convincing, suggesting he was casting them in the photo instead of being affected by them. The unnatural stillness of a captured moment no longer applied to him. He looked like he could move, like he might already have. What disturbed the family most was the subtle change in his position. At first, he had been seated in the middle of the group, but in subsequent versions of the photograph, he stood. Then he leaned slightly forward, then closer to the edge. The others in the image, now so faded they were nearly erased, seemed unaware. With each new version, he grew more detailed while everything else diminished. It was like the picture was being rebalanced, the focus shifting entirely to him. Emily, once unaware, began talking to someone when she was alone. Her parents caught her whispering into corners, giggling at things unseen. When questioned, she only said, "He wants to come out," and smiled like it was a secret she was proud of keeping at night. David dreamed of the photograph changing in his hands, the figure reaching out beyond the borders, pressing against the glossy surface like it was a window. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, the image burned into his mind. One night he awoke too, find the photo on his chest, warm to the touch, as though someone had just placed it there moments before. The presence in the house began to grow undeniable. What had started as unease turned into something suffocating, like the very air had thickened. Lights flickered even with fresh bulbs, and the walls groaned in the dead of night, as if reacting to pressure that wasn't there. Cold drafts crept along the floors, regardless of the season. Emily started waking up with nosebleeds, her hands covered in dark smudges she couldn't explain. Her drawings changed too. What were once colorful scribbles of trees and animals now became chaotic swirls of black ink and crude sketches of a figure with hollow eyes. David's wife began hearing footsteps at night, slow and deliberate, always stopping just outside the bedroom door. When David checked, no one was there, but the photo would sometimes be leaning against the wall in the hallway, facing the door like it had been watching. They both began seeing movement in their peripheral vision, shadows darting just out of sight, the sensation of being watched intensifying each day. Mirrors would fog up from the inside. Even when no one had used them, they reached out to a local historian who had studied the area. Upon seeing the photograph, his demeanor shifted instantly. He refused to touch it and warned them not to bring it into his home. His final words before slamming the door were, "Some things were never meant to be remembered." That night, their dog vanished without a sound, its collar left neatly by the back door. The house itself began to feel warped. Rooms seemed larger one day and smaller the next. The walls didn't seem to meet at the same angles. The attic, once silent now, thumped and scraped during the night, the noises growing more human. Furniture shifted ever so slightly overnight, just enough to make them question their memory. The disappearances began without warning. It started with the small things, the dog gone without a trace, a favorite coffee mug missing from the shelf, a sweater last worn suddenly nowhere to be found. At first they dismissed it as stress, distractions from the strange events unfolding. But then Emily vanished. One moment she was coloring at the dining table, and the next, the crayons rolled to the floor with no child in sight. There was no scream, no door opening, no creak of floorboards, just absence. Her chair still warm, her drawing unfinished. The shadow of a small handprint smudged into the table's surface in a dark, oily residue. The police were called, searches organized, but the photo was never mentioned. How could it be? What would they even say? That they found a man in negative tones, slowly stepping forward in a picture that shouldn't exist. That their daughter whispered to someone invisible and then disappeared without sound. After Emily, it was David's wife. She left the room to get a glass of water and never came back. Only the faint sound of the faucet running and a cold glass on the counter marked her last movement. Her phone remained unlocked on the kitchen table, her wedding ring resting beside it. David searched every inch of the house. The attic, the basement, the woods beyond the property. He screamed into the empty air, desperate for an answer. But deep down, he already knew. The photo had changed again. It was waiting for him on the living room couch, placed perfectly like an invitation. This time, all the other figures were gone, their shapes fully erased. The image was clean, sharp, and modern. The figure in the center stared outward, alone, and the background of the photo now looked unsettlingly familiar.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.